All right, so this is an incredibly complicated situation. And then there's the complications of law enforcement telling you something that, well, you cannot trust a law enforcement officer. If you've got papers that say one thing and an officer tells you another, then you got to listen to other officers when you do what the first officer told you to do, even though it's against what your court paperwork says. Well, that second officer is still going to arrest your ass and tell you, well, we got to follow what the court paperwork says. Makes it complicated. I got to spend some time trying to learn how to beep out stuff on my videos. The reason for that is because the most incriminating evidence against my predators has a bunch of private information in it. Imagine that. Lots of people don't want their names out there. Lots of people don't want their phone numbers out there. You guys for surely don't deserve my social security number. But we got some pretty major issues going on here. Now, the state patrolman that I spoke with, because I did record the entire conversation with him, minus the first probably about 5 minutes when I was trying to set up. See, these officers, instead of being patient, I explained to them that I need to have it recorded. So I needed to get it set up. Now, he did give me back a recording device that I had been waiting on for a while. Everything that was on it was erased. Imagine that. As well as a USB drive that was missing. I'm glad I got them back. Now it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm pretty tired. According to my autism advocate, the stuff that I got to go through, just the stuff that I had sent her in the first set of packets, she said it would take about 4 months to go through it all. In 4 months, the statute of limitations is going to be over on a lot of the crimes that were committed against me. Now, no matter what, he just wanted to make excuses. And, I still have to work with him. I still have to at least try. But there's a lot of little stuff that lets you know that he's not gonna. Like there's a lot of stuff that has to do with these people's motivation for doing the crimes they committed. That's motive. It's part of the investigative process. The investigator, he's a trained investigator. One of the questions that he's supposed to ask is, do you know why these people would do these things? Like, let's say I was assaulted, and I was. If I say I was assaulted, he's supposed to wonder why it is that somebody would have any motivation to assault me. What reason would they have? Or excuse? And it is a major issue. Now, rather than ask me that question, well, I had to try to answer it without him asking. And every time that I tried to explain it, I got cut off to listen to some reason why he couldn't hear what I was saying. How about you shut the fuck up and listen? But it doesn't work too good when you say, hey, shut the fuck up and listen. So I did not say shut the fuck up and listen. Now I'm supposed to try to meet with the guy on Thursday. Well, that's not going to work out too good because I double booked. I got two appointments on the same day at the same time. So at some point today, I got to call up the Nebraska State Patrol and reschedule. Then there's stuff that no matter how many times I explain it to them, they play incredibly stupid. Now, the guy was nice enough and he did write a lot of stuff down, but he didn't know what questions to ask. He also got confused pretty quickly. There's also the fact that, well, it's a very twisted and messed up situation, and with the stuff that he had no interest in hearing and continually talked over me when I tried to say those things. Here's the thing, if he didn't talk over me, I would have been able to finish my sentences. If I'd have been able to finish my sentences on those situations, he would have an understanding of the situations, which leads me to believe that he was going out of his way not to understand the situations and going out of his way not to hear the full story. There's also the fact that on the computer that I'm recording this on, I have the recordings about Sergeant Jones, about how Sergeant Jones did not get a hold of me until after the assault by Scott DaCosta in December of last year. Now, instead of listening to the whole story, this investigator does what most cops do when you try to turn in a cop. He makes excuses or says, I can't, I can't, I can't. One of the things that a lot of these agencies have told me is you need to go to the Nebraska Attorney General's office. Well, I did get a hold of the Nebraska Attorney General's office. They told me to talk to the FBI. And then they told me to talk to the Nebraska State Patrol. Nebraska State Patrol says it's not their job. The FBI says it's not their job. Well, then whose job is it? So this guy today was telling me in order to turn in an officer, it has to go through the Nebraska Attorney General's office. I already knew this. And I tried explaining it to him. Hey, the Nebraska Attorney General's office is the ones who turned me on to you guys to begin with. All the way back in 2018, the Nebraska Attorney General's office was telling me I need to get a hold of the Nebraska State Patrol. They also told me I need to get a hold of the FBI. Those phone calls are on my YouTube and my Facebook. It's going to take literally hundreds of hours of listening to those videos to find the ones in specific that are required for specific situations. Now, one of the things that these officers have done is everything in their power to make sure that the statute of limitations is up. And then I'm not allowed to bring up any of the stuff that they did. It's sick. Now, there's this person calls himself, it's another one of Rich Life's profiles. He types, Scott DaCosta 2 is coming out soon. Stay tuned. Hey bro, Court 3 is coming out soon, question mark. Now this one right here, these aren't too bad. This guy or girl, I don't know which, puts up a lot of really messed up stuff and a lot of over and over and over again harassment. So we're going to click over here on the side, hide user on this channel. Well, now I don't have to read anything from Rich Life. Wouldn't it be nice if I could do that in real life? If in real life I could just block these people and never have to deal with them again. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Anyway, getting back to the situation with the officer, um, my advocate was on the phone with me. She explained a small part of the situation with the public defender in Scottsbluff, as well as my public pretender, Robert Harvoy. God, it would have been nice if that guy would have done his job. If he would have made some effort to actually defend me. Now, they're allowed to use slander from the state of Colorado that there is absolutely no evidence of whatsoever, but they pretend like it is written in stone. Law enforcement has pulled every dirty trick that they can to prevent me from showing evidence. And it works. All of their dirty tricks work. That's why they continue to do them. That's why they are used nationwide. If these tricks didn't work, cops would not use them. If cops could not use their tricks to manipulate the situation to their benefit by outright lying or coercion or otherwise, wouldn't use them. Lying to the media. If lying to the media did not work, cops would not do it. If locking you up for crimes that you did not commit did not work, cops would not do it. If threatening your friends who have children did not work, cops would not do it. Why do cops do these things? Because they work. What's the first thing that an abusive man does to control his girlfriend? Separate her from all of her friends and family. That's for starters. Then you have no support network. What did Natalie's lies do? Separate me from my support network. It wasn't just Natalie, though. She had a lot of help. While she was playing victim, her friends' customers, her ex boyfriends were getting a hold of me to threaten my life and threaten my family's life, or even outright assault me to prevent me from seeing my loved ones. Now, with this Nebraska State Patrol officer that I met with yesterday, there's a lot of things that he just outright wasn't going to hear. There's also the fact that, well, I was up all night last night. I finally got to sleep. 20 minutes later, I got a phone call from him. Now, I've got a recording with another lady who was helping me to set up the appointment with him. He was supposed to call me, I believe, day before yesterday or the day before that. Instead, it was yesterday, and he was supposed to call to set up an appointment. No, he didn't call to set up an appointment. He called to tell me that we have to do it today because he's already in town. Now, you guys know that on multiple occasions, officers have done this and then arrested me when I show up. This time it didn't happen, which I am glad for, but due to a repeated history of it, it is something that I have to be paranoid of. There's also the fact that after I was assaulted by Robert Warnick, first of all, after I had my life threatened by him, somebody should have stepped in and done something. Now, I've filled out a lot of paperwork for the Dual County Sheriff's Department that went absolutely nowhere. Now, Then there's the paperwork for court dates that I didn't get to go to. It's pretty obvious that I didn't threaten to harm Leslie or her family. What I threatened was equality. If you give out my number, I'll give out yours. I think that's fair, especially given all of the restricted numbers that I get called from. The police know that stalkers and harassers and internet nut jobs call their victims from restricted numbers. So law enforcement needs to get a different number. It's also obvious that law enforcement does not have to do that. They don't have to call you from a restricted number. For example, I have Sergeant Jones's phone number, so I can call Sergeant Jones. Matter of fact, that's how I'm going to reschedule with her detective or investigator, is by calling her number and saying, hey, I have another appointment that I need to make it to on Thursday, and I do need to make it to that appointment. One of the tricks that they use is giving you somebody who's going on vacation. Always. You know, I had to deal with that with Amanda Jonas, who is one of the officers in Longmont. I also had to deal with that with, well, I had to deal with that with a lot of officers. They always give me somebody who's getting ready to go on vacation. All right. Because of situations like this, it makes it difficult to trust anyone in law enforcement. When they don't ask the questions that they're supposed to ask you, it needs to send up a red flag. So if I'm able to get some sleep, which there's no guarantee of it, I got too much anxiety about not having enough time, about not having the resources that I need in order to do this. It'd be nice to have more resources, wouldn't it? But then again, where did all of my resources go? They went to paying my predators. And I'm not the only one. Dual County, Nebraska. That's the county that Chapel, Nebraska sits in. Dual County paid at least $30,000 for me to be illegally incarcerated on bogus BS. Now then they keep making excuses when I was prevented from being able to contact my public pretender as well as others. Well, it's illegal to do that. But the investigator doesn't want to hear that. He already has the things that he's going to say pretty well mapped out. He already had it decided how he was going to approach it. And, well, he did talk nice. That's a plus. Lots of people will talk nice to you while lying to your face, though. There's a saying, a crocodile is always smiling. That does mean something. Just because a crocodile is smiling doesn't mean that you're friends. Just because a crocodile is smiling doesn't mean he's going to help you across the river. Just because a crocodile is smiling doesn't mean that it likes you. Now, there's a bunch of people posting up arguments that I wholeheartedly agree with. But then I have to look at the situation objectively. These groups who have these complaints, are their complaints legitimate? Now, compared to the homeless, are their complaints legitimate? Are the things that they're complaining about also things that they happen to do to the homeless? I'm not sure how many of y'all remember about a year and a half ago when a lot of that BLM stuff was going on. We had large groups of black people beating on and smacking around white kids. Like these kids deserve it for not being born black. Well, those kids don't deserve it. With my predators, I got to deal with the fact that they play on the fact that they have kids to try to justify the crimes that they committed. Leslie Snell had to pretend like I threatened her children. And she had to work together with my other predators to prevent me from being allowed to go to court. Robert Warnick also had to lie and pretend like I was threatening his children. William Barr pretended like I had threatened his family. Oh no. If I tell you that I'm going to tell the truth, that's not a threat. That's first of all. And second of all, man, what kind of a parent are you if you're going to tell your kids not to lie and then you're going to outright lie? That's just disgusting. Now, all of these people did these things to prevent me from taking them to court. And I did my best to try to explain that to investigator, I believe it's Woods. So at some point today, after I've gone through a lot of paperwork, and there is no way that I'm going to be able to go through all that paperwork in one day. I mean, just going through the kites, and that's an inmate request form when you're in a jail or a prison. They call it a kite. Even going through all the kites will probably take me 24 to 48 hours. I don't mean 24 to 48 hours from right now. I mean 24 to 48 hours worth of reading and organizing and going through it all. Now, we also had to meet outside at the Catholic Church with people's mowers going on and semis driving by and all sorts of stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff that, well, let me give you an example here. I was assaulted by Boulder Police Department because they assumed that I had killed Natalie Bollinger. If it had come to light that they had broken the law in the way that they did before they caught her actual killer, because mind you, they assumed that I did it, well, they would have gotten in a lot of trouble. How does a police officer prevent you from turning them in? They arrest you. It doesn't matter if they're bogus charges. If you're called mentally ill, nobody gives a shit. If you are a white male in the United States, people don't give a shit. But then again, is that entirely true? No, it's not. Just like a good looking woman can get away with a lot more than most other women, a good looking man can get away with a lot more than other men. He's attractive, so you want to believe him. How is it that so many women get stuck in abusive relationships? How is it that so many men get stuck in abusive relationships? Well, you're shallow and you're dating someone who's shallow. Yeah, that good looking guy who can have any girl that he wants. He's dating you because you're pretty. There's a lot of guys. Let me give you an example of two women who used to live here in Chapel. One of them named Kim and one of them named Alyssa. I went to school with both of these young women, and these were the young women that every guy in school had a crush on. Now, both of them, contrary to popular belief that if a woman is attractive, she must be stupid, both of these women were highly intelligent. However, every dude in school had a crush on them. Every dude in school was in love with one of these two women, and these two women were rivals. Alyssa may not have been the nicest to me all the time, but there was literally only one time where me and Alyssa ever had an issue. That's because I unzipped her book bag. I thought it would be funny. It made her angry. Well, don't unzip people's book bags. Moral of the story. Now, neither one of these young women was a troublemaker. Neither one of them went out of their way to try to destroy my life or anything like that, which later on I've had to deal with. But the other thing is, neither of these two young women was addicted to heroin. Neither one of them was addicted to meth. That makes things a lot easier because they think better. It's a lot easier to make positive decisions for your life when you're not strung out on drugs. Now, police got a lot of tactics that they use to try to prevent you from being heard when you try to turn them in. Arresting you is one of them. Calling you mentally ill is one of them. Taking you to the hospital and telling the nurse that you're schizophrenic is one of them. These tactics are used nationwide for a reason. If they did not work, law enforcement would not use them. Now, there's a lot of videos, literally hundreds and hundreds of videos, that if I could learn how to beep out certain parts of it, and I know that can be done. I've seen videos where they beep out the curse words or beep out people's names. I know it's possible. I just don't know how to do it. There's a lot of computer stuff I got to learn how to do, and I spend a lot of time trying to learn those things until I'm overwhelmed. And when I'm overwhelmed, I have to just step away. Now, on the computer that I recorded the situation on yesterday, I believe I do have the USB space on one of my USBs to take at least that video off of that computer and then put it on this computer and use this computer, hopefully, to be able to edit the thing. Now, there's a lot of you guys that have heard me speaking about my belief in editing. You shouldn't have to hide stuff. People who edit tend to, well, they tend to chop it up into pieces that fit their narrative instead of showing the whole truth. I'm not interested in that. See, cutting out parts like that omits evidence. It omits a part of the truth that might be crucial. It's not easy. Now, this investigator with the Nebraska State Patrol called me today on a restricted number. Now, I know that they don't have to call me from a restricted number. They called a couple of days ago from another phone number that is not restricted. It's the Nebraska State Patrol's phone number in Scotts Bluff. Also, Sergeant Jones called me from her office phone, so I have that number. He did not, absolutely did not, have to do things the way that he did. Also, I asked him repeatedly if I could get his email address. I'd like to be able to send this stuff. He said, I'd prefer to do it in person. I'd prefer to do it in person too, if we're going to take the time to do it and if you're actually going to listen. If you're not actually going to listen, then I got to gather all of the evidence up myself and I have to do the work myself. And I need to wrap it in a pretty pink bow to send to you. Now, as most of you know, there's a lot of people who I have sent this stuff through emails to who were able to see it, but somehow magically law enforcement can't. Somehow magically, um, Rick, I want to say Ragenborn, the sheriff of Arapahoe County, somehow magically he couldn't actually see the evidence. When I tried to send that stuff to the officers in Sydney about that young woman being molested in Sydney, Nebraska, somehow magically that officer could not see what I sent him. I've got multiples of those where other people are able to see it, but somehow the law enforcement agencies that I sent it to are unable to see it. Then there's the fact that Nebraska State Patrol and the Nebraska FBI, as well as the Colorado FBI, as well as the Wyoming FBI, have done everything that they can to completely ignore the crimes against me, including outright committing crimes against me and then charging me for crimes that never happened in order to try to run down the clock on their statute of limitations. After July 3rd of 2018, it was no longer appropriate for me to have to go to Scott DaCosta to try to get anything done. Prior to that, yes, his officers had screwed up really big. I mean, really big. But Scott DaCosta at that point had really only committed minor crimes to try to cover up for what his officers had done. End of June and early July, that's when Scott DaCosta outright started breaking some major laws. See, there's a whole set of laws for disabled people. I keep repeatedly getting my stuff taken away. And then because I don't have those things, they were taken away from me. I'm not allowed to show them. Like right now, I'm kind of sort of not disabled because I was locked up for 7 months and they took my money away. They took my insurance away. They took all of that stuff away. So now I'm technically not disabled, sort of. No, I'm still disabled. My disabilities didn't magic themselves away. With law enforcement locking their victims up, not just in the prisons or the jails, but also locking them up in mental institutions, or I should say behavioral health centers, which are not professional. There is nothing professional about a behavioral health center. The reason for this is because of the lack of professional staff. The difference between a mental hospital and a behavioral health unit is that a hospital is staffed by professionals. Your nurses have been to college or are still going to college. Your doctors have graduated from college. In a behavioral health unit, the people who should be nurses there might have been literally homeless before working there. They might have literally worked for Walmart or 7-Eleven. They don't have to have any actual credentials as far as mental health care goes. Now, I am going to continue working with the state patrol officer because I really don't have a whole lot of choice. Now, then there's the fact that multiple agencies were involved in this. Nebraska State Patrol, Dual County Sheriff's Department, Cheyenne County Sheriff's Department, Cheyenne County Police Department, Garden County Police Department, or sorry, Garden County Sheriff's Department, Scottsbluff County Sheriff's Department. I mean, how many law enforcement agencies does it take to frame an innocent man? And their frame jobs still did not stick. Meanwhile, the Nebraska State Patrolman is telling me basically that he can't investigate other Nebraska State Patrol officers. You know, they keep changing the rules depending on which agency it is or whether or not the person who's making the complaint is a male or a female. We got some major issues here. Now, I'm going to bring up the Gabby Petito situation. There's a lot of minorities right now speaking up hardcore, saying, hey, look at how these pretty white girls are treated compared to us. When our families disappear, we don't get this attention. Gabby Petito gets it, but MMIW doesn't. BLM doesn't. Well, MMIW and BLM do get a lot more coverage than the homeless. See the disparity in the difference between Gabby Petito and MMIW. There is just as much difference between a homeless person and MMIW in the other way. Homeless people are the bottom rung of the ladder. Homeless people are the people that America wants to forget. They lock them up without an honest day in court. In many cases, with no evidence against them. On multiple occasions, I have been arrested and incarcerated with no evidence against me. None. When I try to turn in my predators, there is every excuse out of law enforcement why they can't investigate it, even if it is in their jurisdiction. Now, one of the things that I did today, I did explain about the situation with Chris Kurth and about how, thank goodness, his brother Cody Kurth helped to take care of that situation in a non-violent manner. Non-violent. I brought up the situation with Robert Warnick. Now, because I am a disabled person, it is a felony to do what Robert did. It is a felony for all of these people to threaten my life and to assault me. It is a felony. Now, assaulting somebody could be a misdemeanor. It could be. However, when you are talking about a disabled person, it is an automatic felony. Now, a lot of this stuff, these are criminal activities that were committed by these law enforcement agencies. Criminal activities. They're felonies. Yes, that's criminal court, not civil. Yet these guys want to tell me I can get a civil lawyer. I got to go through a civil lawyer. Blah, 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 blah. through a lot of this, people told me, hey man, your lawyer is supposed to take care of that. And when I say I've got a public pretender, they say, I'm sorry. Don't you have money? No, I don't. Don't you have family that'll speak up? No, I don't. You know, they got these questions that they got to ask, even if it's other inmates in the prison. When you try explaining your situation, they got to ask. Now, my paperwork shows that Scott DaCosta pulled the same tricks that are pulled nationwide. The same exact tricks that Scott DaCosta and his deputies pulled 4 times before this. This is the 5th time that they've pulled this trick. And then there's the fact that officers in the state of Colorado pulled this trick repeatedly too. When somebody is incarcerated, they still have the right to defend themselves, especially against slander in the civil courts. If your constitutional rights can be taken away by the outcome of that court date, you need to be allowed to go and not prevented from going, not cut off from talking to your public pretender. Judges telling me that they can't look at anything. They sure as fuck can. They're fucking judges. If they're going to make decisions based on the fact that I was illegally prevented from going to court, they need to send somebody who can do something about that. My rights as a human being were violated. My rights as an American citizen were violated and still are. And then they really don't want to investigate the crimes when you're trying to turn in a cop. So they repeatedly try to coerce and persuade you to leave and go somewhere else. Well, why don't you move to here? Or why don't you move to there? Or here? Or there? Or this place? Or that place? Completely sidestepping, bypassing, and stepping over your disabilities. Now, your disabilities, or mine, may not necessarily be physical. It might be financial. It might be that you don't know a whole heck of a lot about computers and you got to try to send everything through the computer. If you're computer illiterate like I am, that's not necessarily easy. Then there's the fact that they really give you the impression that they're just doing this to appease you. Kind of like the first time that I went to Dual County Sheriff's Department about the situation with Chris Kurth. When I went in and talked to that guy, that was Cody Selhorst, he thought he could buy me off with a sandwich. He thought that he could bypass having to do his job by buying me a sandwich at Pump and Pantry. That was in 2018, by the way. No, a sandwich is not a fair trade for other people's lives. I needed to be heard. Now, none of these supposed organizations that are supposed to investigate this are doing so. None of them. Maybe Nebraska State Patrol will investigate it. But there needs to be some pressure on them to do so. There also has to be preservation of evidence. They're going to try to drag it out as long as they can and destroy evidence in the process that's a year old. See, there's a certain amount of time before they're allowed to destroy evidence, before they're allowed to destroy their body cameras or the evidence from their body cameras. The investigator that I talked to yesterday, I was supposed to be working with Nebraska State Patrol after the incident around the 4th of July that involved William Barr. It also involved Cody Selhorst. It also involved Jared Hahn. It also involved Scott Costa. And it also involved Jen Beebe. Jen Beebe is no longer working with Region 1. She is now a jail guard in Scotts Bluff. It's no coincidence that her coworkers at her previous job with Region 1 also called her lazy. She also pretended to be nice, partially, when she worked with Region 1, but as a jail guard, she's not a nice person. She was highly antagonistic. Now we got to deal with these issues. If BLM wants to get anywhere, they do need the support of white people. There's a lot of white people that are not going to be supportive if you're shooting them in the fucking head. No, they are not going to agree with BLM. When you are harassing the victims because they're white, victims who have gone through the same thing that you've gone through as a black person, but you're telling them that they need to shut up because they're white. Well, yeah, they're not going to be on your side. There's a lot of people at the very beginning with BLM. There was a lot of us who thought, hey, this is a great opportunity to fight for our rights. We thought that this was going to be something to end police brutality. But it wasn't to end police brutality. Still isn't. What's it about? Special rights. Special rights are not rights, they are privileges. We thought that BLM was going to open up and be about other minorities as well, like possibly MMIW. Maybe BLM put a shout out to the Native American community and say, hey, we're with you. But that hasn't happened, has it? The homeless are fighting for all of our rights, all of them. That's because the homeless are the most diverse community in this country. Every religion, every skin color, every gender, every sexual preference. We get everybody. We get immigrants. We get people who are born here. For the most part, though, we get the most victimized people in America. Both men and women. The number one reason for them to end up homeless is victimization. For women, that victimization is generally domestic abuse. Domestic abuse does not necessarily mean physical abuse, as in hitting and kicking. It can also include sexual abuse. It can also include psychological abuse. Now, when you've got an abuser who wants to control his girlfriend, what does he do? Takes away her telephone, so she can't communicate with anybody. Takes away the keys to the car or the car itself so that she can't go anywhere. And then he kicks her out. Out here in Nebraska, that's even scarier. If you're in the middle of the city and somebody takes your vehicle and takes your telephone, you can go outside and find help. You can go outside and you can find a payphone, you can find something. And I understand that payphones are not very prevalent anymore. But the fact is, it's a short walk to the local convenience store compared to when you live 19 miles outside of town. I don't know how many of y'all have actually walked 19 miles in a day. When I was when I first moved to Chapel, Nebraska, I lived in Chapel and I went to school in Lodgepole, Nebraska. That's the next county over. It's 9 miles in between the towns. My mom's house at the time was part of the way into Chapel, and of course, the high school in Lodgepole was a little bit of a ways into Lodgepole, so it was about 10 miles a day. Well, that's not true, is it? It would only be about 10 miles a day if it was one way. But I also had to make it home from school. That's right, folks. I traveled 20 miles a day for about 3 months while I went to school in Lodgepole. When you're used to doing it every day, it's not a big deal. Through all of this, I've needed people to speak up. And that's what people didn't understand. They didn't understand the difference between when somebody is called mentally ill and the rest of y'all. Kind of like when a black person says, "Hey, you don't know what it's like to be black." That's right, I don't. You don't know what it's like to be homeless, but you want to accuse all homeless people of being on drugs. This is one of the tactics that the police use. Oh, well, he's on drugs, so it's okay that we don't take his report. It's okay that we don't take it seriously. Today, or sorry, it was yesterday, that officer who came to speak with me, I'm sorry, it's kind of chilly out. I got a couple of windows opened up so I could get a draft through. And as a result, I lost my train of thought because a breeze came through. The thing is that through all of this, there has always been some excuse why law enforcement can't look into the crimes that are being committed against me. Some reason. Now, their protocols are wrong. They know that their protocols do more harm than good, but they set up those protocols so that them and their departments don't end up getting sued. The best way to do that is to commit crimes against people who are too broke to hire a civil attorney, and then you just refuse to investigate any of the crimes against them by your officers. Meanwhile, the rules keep on changing, don't they? Everybody wanted to tell me to get a hold of the Nebraska Attorney General's office. And when the Nebraska Attorney General's office told me who I needed to get a hold of to have it investigated, those people told me it's not their job. No, it absolutely is their job. Absolutely is their job. If it wasn't their job, then why did the Nebraska Attorney General's office send me to them? That guy yesterday, I had explained to him that I had talked to the Nebraska Attorney General's office on multiple occasions, that there was supposed to be somebody investigating the crimes against me all the way back in 2018. He asked if that was Sergeant Jones. Well, I didn't have Sergeant Jones's number. I couldn't tell her from another restricted number. I didn't get her phone number or even get to speak with her until January of this year. Imagine that. Now, I want to believe that the Nebraska State Patrol officer that I spoke with yesterday, I want to believe that he's going to start looking at the evidence. Because I know as soon as somebody starts looking at the evidence, just like with my autism advocate, and just like with many of these other people, who many of them ended up kicking me in the teeth and stabbing me in the back and kicking me while I'm down. But the fact is that it was showing actual evidence that got them on my side to begin with. What they didn't like is that I posted up the truth when they didn't keep their word. See, none of these people wanted to pay any attention to the fact that I've already tried what they asked. When you're called mentally ill, you don't get the same opportunities and chances as others. You have to go in with somebody, otherwise, law enforcement is going to sidetrack the situation. They might even try to appease you with coffee or a sandwich. But if you have to go in alone, they're not going to investigate it. Now, when I spoke with Sean Holloway about the situations, and Laura Nelson was there with me, and it is recorded and it is on my YouTube channel here, he didn't bother to investigate it. He didn't even bother to go talk to those people. He never went and talked to Chris Kurth about that. He never went and talked to Robert Warnick. It got to the point where I literally had to record everywhere that I went, because it only takes 5 seconds of the camera being off to not record something important. And sure, that leaves me with a bunch of stuff that's recorded that is just white noise. Sometimes it's a train going by, sometimes it's the breeze because it is western Nebraska. But it just ends up being a lot of recorded nothing. Now, obviously, I don't save the stuff that records nothing. I save everything else, though. Cops will also try to find any excuse to separate you from a recording device. Their recording devices, you need special permissions and special thises and special thatses and a signature from this person and this person in order to do it. But if you record it, well, it's only a couple of pushes away and then it's live on YouTube. It's up for everybody to see. With Gabby Petito, there's not all of the massive quantities of recordings that there were in my cases or my situations. And a lot of people worked together to try to get that body camera footage of Gabby Petito and the van and all that other stuff. But nobody put any effort whatsoever into getting the body camera evidence off of my situation. As a matter of fact, law enforcement, as well as my own public pretenders, did everything that they could to try to hide the body cameras. See, they kept on charging me with crimes that I didn't commit, and then dropping the charges when I asked for the body cameras. Do you know why? Because the body cameras show a different story. The body cameras show that the police outright lied. Now, obviously, I can't trust law enforcement to investigate themselves. It is going to have to go to a civil situation. But for the time being, getting them to at least pretend to investigate means that that body camera evidence should be held. And if that body camera evidence is held, then it can be requisitioned by a civil lawyer. And a civil lawyer can tear that shit apart because there were a lot of crimes committed against me. And not just against me. The situation with Chris Kurth. You know, he hasn't stopped by to threaten me. He hasn't chased me to some other location in a while. But he did threaten me. It'd be nice to get his list, the list of people that he claimed were after me. It'd be nice to have that whole list, wouldn't it? It surely would. But I would settle for him admitting publicly that he did wrong and apologizing for it. Same thing with Robert Warnick. He could get on and make a public apology for what he did. I also showed my busted telephone, the one that Robert Warnick broke. And Robert Warnick's situation is one of the ones that I got to turn in. When a disabled person is being abused, protocol is for the state to issue a protection order against their abuser. According to their own protocol, they were supposed to issue a protection order against Robert Warnick the first time that I went to them. But they didn't. Laura Nelson told me when we had to go in and talk to Sean Holloway, she told me afterwards that she didn't think the Dual County Sheriff was going to do anything, or the Dual County Sheriff's Department, and she felt that I probably should go just to the FBI because it was obvious I wasn't going to get anything going on here. Although the things that Sean Holloway had to say, well, there are a lot of the things that you guys pretended I was crazy for saying, but it's not so crazy when an officer is saying that, is it? Most people don't want to do their jobs. Most cops want to get paid for driving around and getting chubby. When it comes to DHHS, it's a family service. You need to look at it that way. If you go in alone, you are probably going to be denied repeatedly. If you go in there with someone else, you are way more likely to get help. If you go into court alone, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get railroaded just because you showed up alone. That judge is going to deny you your rights. But if you've got members of your family who go in with you, you go in with a support network that is showing you some solidarity and speaking up, hey, we're not going to allow this to just happen. It makes a difference. I couldn't walk by somebody being raped in an alley and be fine with it. I'm not one of those people who could just let it happen. There's a lot of the homeless folks, a lot of tough guys, as a matter of fact. They want to pretend like they're all macho and tough, and they go out and they start shit with people They stir up a big old hornet's nest. And then when they're scared because of the consequences that they don't want for the things that they did, they call the cops and outright lie. Is this okay? No, it's not. Now, separating it into civil and criminal, and then serving someone with civil papers while they're incarcerated on criminal charges, those criminal charges are bogus. And the stuff on the civil stuff is also bogus. But it doesn't matter because you are going to be denied the right to go to your civil cases. Natalie Bollinger's family, after being busted pulling the bullshit that they were pulling with these web sleuth groups and many of the wingnuts that they found in it, they went, hey, we'll try to get protection orders in 2 different counties on the same day at the same time. That way, no matter what, Sean loses and he can't speak up about the crimes that we've committed. Well, it didn't work. There's also the fact that law enforcement repeatedly took my evidence but refused to take a look at it. They would not look at any of the crimes committed against me in multiple states, Nebraska being one of them. Laura Nelson was not the only person who was pissed that Dual County Sheriff's Department did not do their job. Molly Smith, who used to work at Pump and Pantry here in town, was also extremely pissed off that the Dual County Sheriff's Department did not do their jobs. See, Molly Smith went in with me to try to get them to do their jobs. Jared Hahn was supposed to. He was supposed to go talk to Laura Nelson. How do I know that he did not talk to Laura Nelson? Because I asked her. Later on, when Scott DaCosta finally talked to Laura Nelson told me that he was asking pointed questions. He wasn't interested in the truth. He was interested in anything that he could use to try to justify the crimes of his officers. While repeatedly going out of his way to tell me that he couldn't do anything about the Natalie situation or hear anything about the Natalie situation, and so on and so forth. He wanted to try pretending to Laura Nelson that I was in love with Natalie. And of course, Laura Nelson did correct him. Laura Nelson explained to Scott DaCosta that it wasn't like that. She also told me that she got the feeling that he wasn't done, that he was planning on coming back, but he never did come back. They were supposed to talk to Laura Nelson. They were supposed to talk to Chris Kurth on more than one occasion. They were supposed to talk to Robert Warnick on more than one occasion. It should not have gotten to the point where I had to record myself everywhere that I went for my own safety. And it certainly shouldn't have gotten to the point where I was being assaulted over it. If it hadn't been for people like Chris Kurth and Robert Warnick here in town, I wouldn't have had to record myself everywhere that I went. My autism advocate, hopefully she'll be able to speak with him too and get something going on with that. The difference between her and I is that she doesn't believe in recording anything. You know, that has put a red flag up between me and her since day one. With her not being able to show up in person, she was muted from my court dates. She was prevented from speaking. She knew that the narrative that they were selling was wrong, but she couldn't say anything about it. That's because she's all the way on the other end of the state, and we got to do it over the internet. Repeatedly, I was prevented from speaking up. Repeatedly, things that any idiot could look up on the internet, those things were used to pretend like I was some sort of schizophrenic nut job. When I said that one of my videos got almost 94,000 views, they tried pretending that I hallucinated this. No, that video is, well, it still exists. Right next to the part where it says how many views it got, it says 93K. That means 93,000 people. When I said that they are still making things about Natalie Bollinger, they're still making these web sleuth channels, and that these web sleuth channels paint me as a monster. None of these places bother to look at both sides. They don't want to take a look at any actual evidence. That's the thing, is that it is slander. I have been abused by the police, by law enforcement across this country over slander, repeated slander. Now, it's connected if they want it to be connected. It's not connected if they don't. I'll give you an example. When I was assaulted by Waylon Lolatai and then charged with assault, they claimed that it was unrelated to the situation with Natalie Bollinger. No, 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 no. Everything that has happened since I left Virginia to get away from them in 2016. I drove 1,700 miles to get away from Natalie and her sister and the rest of her family. 1,700 miles to get away. Imagine that. A lot of y'all, you lose a loved one and you completely fucking flip your shit. One loved one. I was separated from all of my loved ones because some pretty little white girl wanted to get fucked up on heroin and was too embarrassed to tell the truth. She did not care if an innocent man's life was destroyed. Now, there's also the part about being stalked. Tim Beeson was one of my stalkers starting all the way in March of 2017. That's right. And he was not my first stalker over Natalie. Meanwhile, while he is committing crimes against me, he's also helping Natalie. A lot of people helped Natalie's family of predators and Tim Beeson, despite the fact that these were the people who actually committed these crimes. I wasn't stalking Natalie. I was trying to stop the stalking that I was having to endure. And the stalking that I was having to endure, I'm not talking about just people getting a hold of me, just some random stranger on the internet. I'm talking about people who have access to me in real life. I'm talking about, in some of these cases, people that I have known for years. People who I had never done wrong. But if a pretty girl lies and says that you stalked her, it must mean that you are after vagina. And that's how it's been grossly reinterpreted. as if everything that I did to try to get the abuse to stop was all because I was after Natalie's vagina. Well, that's just stupid. Anyway, it's 4:17 in the morning here. If I do get some sleep, I'll probably sleep until 1 or 2 in the afternoon. That's if I get to sleep. If not, I will probably pass out of exhaustion at around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe a little bit earlier. I don't have a whole lot of time until Thursday. Now, the way that the state patrolman made it sound, they are going to investigate these crimes. That ought to give me some protection. But there needs to be a temporary protection order in place. Disabled people are prevented from getting these things, especially if they're called mentally disabled. Many of you know how dangerous Ted Bollinger is. How many of you know that I tried to get a protection order against Ted Bollinger in this town? That was over a situation with my grandmother's funeral back in 2018. If Natalie and her friends had left me alone when I left Virginia, that would have been the end of it. If she'd have spoken up when I got a hold of her and let her know what was going on, that would have been the end of it. Instead, I had to deal with people like Tim Beeson. And knowing what he did to Natalie, and then the fact that he's back in her life, scared the hell out of me. This man is as horrible as her father. Natalie was underage when Tim Beeson was having sex with that young woman. Of course, she was also underage when her dad was having sex with her. Now, these predators of mine work together across multiple jurisdictions, multiple jurisdictional boundaries, and the police did the same thing. Jurisdiction only matters one way. See, you try to turn in a police officer, he sends you to a nuthatch in a different county. He sends you to a jail in a different county, or a prison in some cases in a different county. And then you're not allowed to do nothing. When I tried to explain all of the dirty little tricks that prevented me from doing what it is that they say, hey, you should have done this, you should have done that, you should have done this, you should have done that, you should have contacted these people, you should have contacted those people. But when you try explaining, hey, I tried, I was denied access to the phone, or hey, I tried, they would not allow me to have the envelopes that I needed to do that, or, well, many situations that are similar. They don't want to hear it. That guy yesterday didn't want to hear it. It was pretty obvious. Now, when it comes to motive, that's pretty important for an investigation. For an investigator to repeatedly cut you off when you're trying to explain that shows that he is literally going out of his way not to do his job. When he's trying to suggest that you move somewhere else, let me ask you a question. If moving somewhere else allows your predator to do that to other people, does that make it okay? How much money is it going to cost you to move? Where are you going to move to? Do you have the finances to do so? Do you have the credit history to do so? Where are you going to go and how much is it going to cost? How many of your resources were taken away because you were falsely accused? Now, let's use the example of rape. Let's say you're raped. You go to the cops to turn in your rapist, and they say, well, why don't you just move? Why don't you just move? Why don't you move to Pennsylvania? Why don't you move to California? Why don't you move to Washington State? Why don't you move? Why don't you move? Why don't you move to another country? Ha! I'm not allowed to leave this country. Now, if you stick around and fight it, your rapist might go to prison. And a rapist in prison is not going to rape you out here. He's not going to rape any of your friends. He's not going to rape some random stranger. He's in prison. Everybody outside of the prison is relatively safe. If you just move, you are letting the predator win. And you are allowing that predator access to more victims. Now, how would you feel if your rapist that you were trying to turn in, let's say you moved out of Nebraska, your rapist was from Nebraska, and you decide you're going to move to California. Now, let's say you're in California and you find out that some homeless dude is being charged with a crime that he didn't commit, and that your rapist is actually the one that committed it, but cops don't want to hear you. It's pretty obvious the cops don't want to hear you. They tried to coerce you into moving somewhere else. See, this is one of the techniques. Obviously, I'm trying to turn in Nebraska State Patrol. Any Nebraska State Patrol officer is likely to pull the same crap that all of these other agencies pulled when I tried to turn them in. Now they tell me, oh, we can't investigate ourselves. You have to go to another law enforcement agency. Those other law enforcement agencies tell you got to go back to the agency you started with. Nebraska State Patrol, when I tried to turn in Scott DeCosta repeatedly, tell me, what is it they told me in those phone calls? We don't police the police. You have to take this to Dual County. So I called Dual County. They tell me to call the Nebraska State Patrol. Nebraska State Patrol says I got to call Dual County. Dual County says I got to call Nebraska State Patrol. This guy today, or yesterday rather, couldn't quite understand the fact that while he's telling me, well, you really need to go through the Nebraska Attorney General's office. He says they're going to collect this and they're going to give it to the Nebraska Attorney General's office, and then the Nebraska Attorney General's office gets to decide if they're going to investigate it. Well, the Nebraska Attorney General's office already turned me over to these people, turned me on to these people, gave me these people's numbers, whatever you want to, however you want to say it, so that these people could do that investigation. This investigation against the Nebraska or against the Dual County Sheriff's Department was supposed to be started in 2018. 2018. Imagine that. Anyway, this video is almost an hour and a half long. I need to try to get some sleep. No guarantees that's going to happen. I don't even know if I stayed on the topic for the video. It doesn't tell me what the name of the video is while I'm recording it. We need to work together. Yes, there are things about BLM that I speak out about, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to fight for black people's rights. It disgusts me when somebody is treated like a homeless person. Zaid Atkinson, they tried pretending that that situation was a racist situation. No, they assumed he was homeless. They treated him halfway like a homeless person. See, here's the difference between Zaid Atkinson getting his face smashed into the ground by Boulder Police Department and what actually happened. What actually happened was that the guy who lived in the house, who was recording it from the house, let them know he was recording and they behaved themselves. That's right, folks. Zaid Atkinson, who got $125,000 out of the Boulder County for this incident, he was pampered during this incident. Any of y'all want to say that's messed up because he's black? Go screw yourself. He was treated nicer than a homeless person in that situation would have been treated like. Now, sure, the situation started because they assumed he was homeless. But when they knew that they were being recorded by somebody inside of their house with their door closed, they knew they had to be on their best behavior, and they were. A lot of y'all say, well, they had guns, blah, 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 blah. Yes, they had guns. They're police officers. They always have guns. They drew their guns. Well, they often draw their guns, especially in Boulder, especially against homeless people. Many of those officers would love nothing more than to straight up murder a homeless person and get away with it. So they try to instigate scenarios that make that possible. Now, for me, being out now, I can record a situation instead of it just being a situation where there's a camera up in a corner somewhere and they know all of the obscure places where they can abuse you. And then there's no sound to it, so they can sell whatever narrative they want. Well, instead of that scenario, I have access to the evidence. I can record the actual words coming out of these people instead of them getting to claim whatever they want. Because they have a badge, it will be assumed that they're the one telling the truth. Because they call me mentally ill, it'll be assumed that I'm the one who is not telling the truth. And that's how they play the game. And it is a game. When they say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You should say, I can't, you won't let me. Because in reality, court is not about showing the truth or getting justice. It's about how much of the evidence you can suppress. And law enforcement suppressed a lot of evidence. Good night, folks.